G'day, Skyfarers, AoS Coach here, and we are talking Kharadron or Kharadron Overlords, depending on what it says on your footnote. And we're going to talk about the new faction pack that has just dropped on Warhammer Community. We are in 4th edition, and I want to really get into the weeds and understand what does KO look like in 4th edition? How does an expert really look at this particular faction? And somebody who has flown high, they've come down, descended from the clouds, ready to talk to me about 4th edition KO. It is the Lord Magnate himself, Matt Barker from Barrak Aethercast. Shout out to my homies in KO. Absolutely committed to one faction on a YouTube channel. I commend their commitment, also their dedication, but also their insight. So in addition to this particular video, you might want to go check out Aethercast. I'd highly recommend it. And Matt has been in the code right, looking through all of his rules, and we're going to talk a bit about how you kind of land and shoot me off the board in 4th edition. Matt, g'day, welcome.
Hey, how's it going, Coach? Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to talk KO and 4th edition.
Well, where do we start? Like, obviously, we've got a new set of rules. Our faction has been changed. Things that we used to know are no longer true. We have a whole bunch of new things to add to our book, and it's super exciting, right? As I think of KO, and first off, one thing I was absolutely excited about, I'm going to spoil this here. I'm sure it's not really a spoiler, but our mustache man himself, like, it was so nice to see Brock is no longer locked to a particular sub-faction. So I'm hoping Brock hits the table a lot more, because I noticed it in Stormcast where I'm like, right, I want to run Gardas, I want to run Vandus or whatever, but I don't want to run it in Hammers of Sigmar or Hallowed Night. I was going to say Hallowed Knights. But it's like now all these things are being unlocked. So I'm super excited to talk to you about KO. But before we start that, who are you? Where are you from? And what drew you to KO?
Again, just want to say big thank you to having me on the show to talk 4th. Cheers. And KO in particular. So I've been in the Warhammer hobby for quite some time, starting in about 3rd edition Warhammer 40K back in the late 90s. I'm sure, so there are a couple of your audience members that are old Warhammer heads like me. But I never really got into fantasy. But when AoS dropped, I was intrigued. I love the simplicity of the rule set, and that the love of simplicity of the rule set even extends today into 4th edition. What drew me to KO is, to be honest with you, I started it as a pet project because I would consider myself maybe a big Nurgle fan, and this faction is pretty much the complete antithesis of that faction. And I love the dichotomy. I think it makes me a more well-rounded player. It makes me look at the game differently. And I was really intrigued by sort of the ranged combat aspect of that KO brings. However, the more you get into the weeds and become more accustomed to their playstyle, you realize that might not always be the case. It's not simply a stand and shoot gunline type army that I think a lot of people might have that misconception. And I think we'll get into that.
Yeah, and I think that was actually added to, was it 3rd edition in the book, where you actually had the frigate who can now charge into things and like pop off your balloon boys, right? That was really the first time that we have felt that melee focused type of KO has come onto the board, because otherwise it's been, I remember when KO very first came out in 3rd edition, it was like balloon boys, boats, pew pew, then we've seen these evolutions over time. It's always been shoot, 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 shoot. I feel now 3rd edition brought a new dimension, and I wonder, has 4th edition added an extra layer to the onion of KO? And I guess we'll talk about it. I'm sure people can follow along with the rules pack now that it's public, unlike other discussions with Jordan. I'm like, yeah, you'll get your book sometime. Just trust us until this particular point. But you can call us out, and I'm sure you've got a lot of thoughts, but hopefully this adds to, or challenges maybe you're thinking about KO. So let's go to 4th edition, right? So you've played KO for 3rd edition, you've done really well, you've got a really good feel. If I'm somebody who has that experience from 3rd edition, how have you found your 4th edition journey in regards to what have you noticed that's changed? Has anything particularly impacted your decision making, whether it's new command abilities or lost command abilities or the size of objectives. Like there's been so much that's changed in fourth. What does the KO lens of this looks like?
That's a really great question. So talking a little bit about the transition from third edition to fourth edition in terms of Kharadron Overlords, it was really, for me, a tale of two editions, right? When the new book dropped for KO in third edition, a lot of people gravitated toward heavy Thunderer lists. So if you're playing against Kharadron Overlords, maybe in a local club or a tournament, you may have got the bad touch by the Thunderers, by people stacking Rend and shooting long range and taking out your key pieces. And it can be a little bit frustrating to play against when there's not a lot of interactivity there. Eventually, points adjustments and rules upgrades, you started to see a little bit more of a focus toward the melee side of KO. But again, there wasn't a whole lot of interactivity there because, as you alluded to, in third edition, when the frigate charged, everybody was packed inside the sky vessels, and when the frigate charged, they all popped out, struck first, blew things up, and then Bob's your uncle, right? And then it's either all done one way or the other. Either the KO would get hit back, and they're pretty fragile, which I think we'll get into as well, or they do a lot of damage up front and close with a lot of nasty tricks, and there wasn't a whole lot left on that side of the board. Again,
or you roll that dice and you yeet yourself out of combat immediately after you struck, and I'm like.
Right. And so I think for third edition playing against KO there, and listen, I'm not going to say I was a choir boy in that regard. A lot of my builds in third edition KO revolved around packing as many engine riggers as I could in an ironclad. I called it the party boat list. And then all the guys in there are just having a grand old time, having some good ale, and eventually whipping their chainsaws out and tearing things up. But anyway, fourth edition brings a whole new dynamic with so much more interactivity between the players, regardless what army you play with, right? Whether you're playing Kharadron Overlords or not, there's a whole added complexity and interactivity on both turns. Kharadron Overlords doubles down on that, I think, with just a lot of options for list building. You alluded to it earlier where Brock isn't locked to one of the specific sky ports anymore. You'll find a lot more list building opportunities when you have less restrictions like that. And again, with the regiment builds, how you're able to really build the army however you want. If you wanted to build an all sky vessel list for the most part, you really can do that. If you wanted to play a lot of boots on the ground, you can do that. So, I feel in summation, Kharadron Overlords are really rolling with the punches very synergistically with the changes from third to fourth.
Let me throw a couple of rapid fire questions at you then.
Let's do it.
All right, let's do rapidly, right? This is completely off the
Aether Storm round, lightning round, Aether Storm round.
Yeah, I like that. I might tax that for future videos. Completely off the cuff, by the way. So
Sure.
Let's talk command abilities. So bunch of command ability changes, and I call this out specifically because you have lost Unleash Hell, but you have gained Cover Fire. Now, obviously, there's other things, power through and countercharge and things. Actually, countercharge is probably a nice one as well. But how do you think about the new command abilities? Any of them that stand out? Are you thinking differently because you no longer have an Unleash Hell? How does countercharge kind of impact the way that you play? Talk to me.
So Unleash Hell really emphasized, to take advantage of Unleash Hell, you really needed to play a little bit more of a reserve play style and then sort of counterpunch, right? To be able to absorb the charge, utilize your Unleash Hell with the unit that you wanted to. Covering fire allows a little bit more freeing playstyle, so you don't have to necessarily utilize a limited board space to be able to maximize the effect of Unleash Hell. You can play in a much larger portion of the board. Covering fire also allows for units to because shooting phase only happens on your turn, right? So if you get double turned, you could go 2 rounds without ever using your Thunderers, for example, because they're not typically melee units. So it adds a lot of depth to your list building and how you play. Power through is a whole other question in and of itself, and I have some strong thoughts on that when we talk about one unit in particular.
All right, cool. Speaking of double turn, actually, that's a really good segue. KO is somebody who has been notorious for really making the most of a double turn and often playing for the double turn, right? You know, really getting in your face, shooting off your opponent, doubling down with the double turn, shooting them off even more. And hopefully you have neutralized your opponent and they can't strike you back. Has that changed your thoughts and play style? Are you concerned about dropping the 4 points for not being able to take a battle tactic if you do take the double? Like, talk to me about your thinking here.
So I think, like you mentioned, in 3rd edition, maybe even 2nd edition, Kharadron Overlords were really punishing when they took a key double turn or won the priority roll. So it was used more offensively against your opponent. I think from what I've seen, and in my opinion, the changes to 4th edition and the changes to the faction, you're going to be more wary. Kharadron Overlords players are going to be more wary about being doubled than actually punishing with the double turn.
Talk to me. Why?
I think shooting damage has been reduced across the board. Shooting ranges has been reduced across the board. And so a smart opponent is going to be able to guard their key pieces that are providing buffs or providing some sort of synergy within their own army. And because range and damage has generally been reduced across the board, and because there is no more Unleash Hell, and you don't have to worry about charging into a Kharadron Overlord's castle and then going down a key bracket on one of your monsters, or losing a bonus because you've lost a certain amount of models.
Yeah, love it. There's so many changes that I could ask you about, you know, whether it's objective size, whether it is there's no allies anymore. Actually, one more I will ask you about, and then I want to get into the rules.
Sure.
And it's one that you don't really get to benefit from, but I think it's worth acknowledging because it's not going to be a part of this presentation. And that is the free manifestations. And specifically, not the Kronspine, not that I'm going to focus on the Kronspine, but everyone now is going to get a free bunch of manifestations, and you really don't get to play in this particular space. You don't have your own manifestations, and you don't have any wizards. You can turn some people as if they were wizards for the purposes of unbinding, but you can't summon unless you go in for a regiment of renown that has a spellcasting ability. So there's going to be a bunch of Kronspines and Purple Suns and Gnashing Jaws, and you know, there's potentially going to be back at a time, Matt, with like 2nd edition where endless spells were just everywhere. How does that change your thinking? Is it a concern for a KO player? Talk to me about, you know, your thinking here.
Yeah, it's absolutely a concern if you're a Kharadron Overlords player, especially if you're playing within the competitive ecosystem, because as you mentioned, there are no wizards in this army. There is no way to participate in that portion of the game. Not only that, a key thing that a lot of people may have gotten a bad touch from in the past is there's no spell in a bottle. So previous editions, Kharadron Overlords player, even though they didn't have a wizard, in 2nd edition, you at least had to pay the points for it. In 3rd edition, you didn't even have to pay the points for the endless spell. Some older players might have remembered Kharadron Overlords player bringing Warp Lightning Vortex in their list because you could just bring anything you wanted. I see that sigh, and I hear that sigh, and I see that shaking of the head. So
I've been through all of the bad touches for KO, whether it was like the 30 balloon boys hitching rides on boats from the spell in the bottle craziness. What was it? That one was really popular. Everblaze Comet was popular when it did the double pulse. There was
if we're reminiscing here,
Purple Sun.
I was big on, and all of those great options. I was a big fan of the Realm Scourge Rupture from the Slaves to Darkness kit, because it moved in one direction, and so your opponent couldn't turn it back on you, and it reduced movement, and so it synergized with the Navigator who halved movement. So you could theoretically, there was one time I was playing against a Maw Crushers player, and this is back when Navigators stacked their half movement. So I hit him with a half move, I hit him with another half move, so now he's a quarter move, and then I hit him with the Realm Scourge Rupture, and so he's 1/8 his move. Go ahead, dude. Mighty Destroyer. Move your 2-inch in the hero phase. It's all good. It's all good. So there have been so many of these little combos that Kharadron Overlords players have used, looking to their code rights to find loopholes in the code to exploit. But now there are none. They've all been closed. So it's certainly a concern for Kharadron Overlords players looking to that. There are some counterplay, as we'll get into in a little bit, but I think there are some abilities and some tricks in the index here to make up for it, though.
Before we move into the rules, overall, how are you feeling about KO?
I am feeling very positive about this army. I'm feeling very positive about the direction they're moving into for a number of reasons. One of the major reasons is not even from a gameplay perspective, but more from a game experience aspect. When I buy Kharadron Overlords models, I painstakingly put them together and have these battles going on in my head, and I start painting them, and I develop stories, and I really engage with the lore and the art. And for me to then show up to my local game club or to go to a tournament and then not be able to play with the models that I have bought, built, painted, and, you know, as a labor of love, to put them on the sideboard and then not be able to use them. It was not only was it a feel bad for your opponent when everything was piled into a boat and got all these great defensive buffs, but I didn't get to play with the toys that I wanted to. So it was a little bit of a feels bad too for the KO player, and I love that is being rolled back. And then one final thing I'll say is, you mentioned earlier about the smaller objective size. While I think it's a great thing overall for the game, I think it opens up a whole new aspect of fighting over objective and concentrated points of power on the board. It's a huge thing to adjust for Kharadron Overlords players, because people remember you could fly high or teleport to the other side of the board and land on an objective, even if your opponent had some models on it. Those days are gone, staying outside of 9 inches when the objective is not even 9 inches in diameter. So that is a huge change that will hit some Kharadron Overlords players very quickly on their first game of 4th edition if they're not careful and prepared for it.
Yeah, they're going to have to get closer to the enemy and realize that now you're in range for a countercharge. You are now in range for so many other things. Or to your point, you maybe fly high is not the right option, and maybe you've now got to be moving more around the board than flying high, dropping onto an objective and scoring it. So there's probably a lot of considerations, and this is the thing I'm really excited to understand a bit more about, is like what has happened with KO. So let's get into the rules, and by all means, you all can look at this on your PDFs. We'll go through this as best we can, but not be here for 10 years. KO's battle traits, a lot are in common. When I looked at this for the first time, and I'm like, oh, okay, they don't seem like they've fundamentally changed too much, like what KO is, right? You've still got fly high, you've still got descend from the clouds, which is obviously tied to fly high. You've got your transport abilities through your Skyfarers, and then you've also got a rule for units that are within your ironclads or your frigates, so you're getting a little defensive buff. Has a lot changed? Anything I should consider? Anything that has changed for the better or the worse? Like, talk to me battle trait wise.
So regarding battle traits, it's really interesting, because if you've been playing Kharadron Overlords for a long time, like I have, you'll recognize a lot of these abilities. So flying high replaces fly high, where flying high was a callback to the 1st edition way that Kharadron Overlords players played, where they had their units in their sky vessels, but then they went up into the clouds and then came down somewhere else later in the battle. the last two editions have seen you be able to physically in game, not in the deployment phase as flying high here is now, but pick up your model and put it somewhere else immediately without that delayed reaction. There are both positives and negatives to that. You can't react as quickly, but with this new ability, flying high, you're able to maybe catch your opponent off guard a little bit. Your opponent is automatically on the defensive because you're able to concentrate your power where the Kharadron Overlords players need it. So there's both goods and bads. I think it's really great. I lovingly refer to this Battle Tome. I joke around on some chats that this is Battle Tome Transport Skyfarers. Transport Skyfarers is the sauce. It's where KO players are going to cook. This is the ability that if you are not prepared for it, or if you can't maximize it as a Kharadron Overlords player, this is where the book lives and dies. Transport Skyfarers is very, very important.
All right, so considering it's important, I'm going to read it out, and then you can tell me why it's important, what you're thinking about, and we'll obviously tie this all together with lists and stuff, but
Sure.
let's unpack this a little bit, right? So Transport Skyfarers is a reaction. So you declare a non-charge move ability for a friendly sky vessel. So it's a sky vessel using the move ability. You can pick a number of units up to the sky vessel's transport capacity. See the war scroll of the capacity. Each of them are going to be different. That is wholly within 6 inches of it to be the target. Units that have been transported this turn cannot be targets. So you then remove the targets from the battlefield. After the sky vessel ends its move, you must set up each target unit on the battlefield wholly within 6 inches of the sky vessel and not in combat. Those units that have been transported, a unit cannot use charge abilities if they were transported in the same turn. All right. Massive block of text. Let's break this down a little bit and talk to me about the importance of this rule.
So, it is a little bit of a word salad there. But once you play around with it, either on Tabletop Simulator or at your local game store, you will see just the massive power that this holds with a lot of nuanced play for the Kharadron Overlords player. So essentially, whenever a sky vessel makes a non-charge move, whenever they use a non-charge move ability, any Kharadron Overlords unit, a number of units and a number of models, depending on the sky vessel, the Grundstock gun hauler is going to hold fewer. The Ironclad is going to be able to hold more. Wholly within 6 inches, those units can just be picked up. The sky vessel finishes its move, and then those units can be placed wholly within 6 inches of the sky vessel. The power in this ability comes from the wording non-charge move ability. So whether you move, whether you power through, whether you redeploy, anytime you make a non-charge move, you can move your units around the board. And this plays around a lot with what I said earlier, which was kind of a negative play experience for the Kharadron Overlords players because your toys weren't on the board. Now they are, but you still have that mobility. A lot of people sometimes call Kharadron Overlords the shooting army. Sometimes they say, oh my God, it's a melee army. Really, Kharadron Overlords is a movement army. If you love the ability to move your pieces in strategic places and focus your strength in the exact manner that you want to, this Transport Skyfarers rule is the battle trait for you. And then tied to that, the Sky Vessel cover. Anybody that's within any units that are wholly within 6 inches, they get a -1 to hit roll. You're going to recognize that from the previous rule where if they were embarked in the sky vessel, they were -1 to hit. They also were +1 save. They lost the +1 save, but you still get a little defensive buff for being around your sky vessel.
I was just looking at a bunch of keywords. So by the way, if you are unfamiliar, I would highly recommend you read your General's Handbook or your core rules, really get clear on some of these keywords, right? Because you'll notice flying high has the deploy keyword. You'll start to see non-charge moves. So when you start looking at those combinations and synergies, like can I do it through power through? Great question. Have a look at your core rules. You will see power through. The command ability only has keyword move. So really start to unpack that a little bit more. I love your thinking so far. And I guess, like, how are you thinking about using this particular ability in game? Is there a strategy? Is it more of a reactionary play when something happens? Like, what does it mean to you?
The ecosystem that this rule lives in is as diverse as the player's imagination. You can't, now, of course, there's limitations within game, right? You can't use it when you make a charge move, when the Sky Vessel makes a charge move. But other than that, if you can't, as long as you're obviously playing within the rules of the game, I guess goes without saying, but it's just so open-ended, right? It's just and I think the more you think about it, the more you start to come up with interesting applications or scenarios where this is important. Are you about to get charged by some big scary unit or monster? When you redeploy the Sky Vessel, the unit that was previously in front of it, say you have some Thunderers that are in front of it and you're about to lose that unit to a charging Maw Crusher, well, guess what? You can redeploy the Sky Vessel, and then those Thunderers then get picked up as long as they're wholly within 6 inches. The Sky Vessel finishes its redeploy, and then they can just be placed wholly within 6 inches of the Sky Vessel. So you don't have to put them in front of the Sky Vessel and put them wholly within 6 inches behind it. And now they're much more, now they've made the distance they were away from the Sky Vessel, plus the redeploy move, plus wherever you put them. And so it can be used both defensively, as I just mentioned, or offensively, as I think we'll see in a little bit, with a very interesting couple of combinations.
Yeah, love it. Love it. Yeah, the flying high definitely has changed a little bit. I think that's the first thing, right? Where, geez, I remember you could fly high out of combat, which is like, oh, I'm in combat. See you later. I'm out of here.
Bye.
This is much more for like Stormcast, right? Where you're putting something in the sky, it then comes down at an appropriate time, and then you move around and do your thing. So
it'll play into a very particular, it'll appeal to a particular type of player. It will appeal to a particular strategy, to a particular list. It's a great tool in the toolbox. It's no longer as ubiquitous as it was across the army in previous editions, because, as you said, Fly High was a War Scroll ability, and you could just, if you had 10 gun haulers, you could make 10 fly high moves, and you could, redeploy your army. But no longer is that the case. But it is still a very powerful tool in the hands of a skilled player.
It is very powerful. I guess moving away from the old version of the rule, you no longer have that get out of jail free card where you're like, I just got to get out of here. You will be punished for misplay. And as you've already said, you can be relatively fragile. So, really think through your movement and think about your various options. Yeah, I like it. I like it. I mean, obviously, if I was a KO player, I would like the old rules even more, but they don't exist. So, sorry, not sorry. We now start building out our what used to be called sub-factions. They're now called battle formations, and you get to choose up to 4. Oh, by the way, we obviously noticed there's no code. There's no footnotes. There's no you know your language better than I do. What's it called? You had the
Articles, the amendments, and the footnotes. Yeah. I don't think very many people are sad to see a board-wide, resource-free 4-up rally go away. It was totally balanced, and I never took advantage of it.
Look, as a Kane player, I definitely didn't put that on my my cauldron, especially with Zealous Orator as well, and shutting off Inspiring. I definitely didn't do that with Witch Elves. You've got your sub-factions, aka your battle formations. There are 4 of them. So you have your Iron Sky, your Aether Runners, your Endrineer Guild Expeditionary Force, and your Grun Corp Wing. Oh, why do you always have the most difficult names to pronounce in one go? Like
I love
artifact, that bloody artifact that's like 10 million words. All right, so you got 4 options, right? First one, you ignore the first point of damage that would be allocated to each Sky Vessel in each phase. You have +2 to movement characteristics of your Sky Vessels. Then the other 2 are once per game, once per battle, whether it's a deployment phase or a shooting phase ability. When you look at these 4, what stands out from you as this is really good, or this particular build is really powerful, or this is like, if I was running lots of Ironclads, this is the build, or Balloon Boys, this is what I'm going to build? How do you see this?
So, at an overarching level, I think what this does is we talked about not limiting players to a specific skyport. My absolute favorite skyport, Barrak Mornar, has always held a special place in my heart. The most Isley equivalent of the skyports. Never, the a hive of scum and villainy. They are the piratiest of the pirates. But no longer am I tied to a specific skyport and a specific playstyle. In fact, what you can do is take your favorite units and then incorporate a battle formation that complements that. So, for example, if you wanted to play just an absolute armada of gun haulers and frigates and maybe an ironclad, you wanted like a floating army of ships. You take the Iron Sky Attack Squadron. I'm sorry, the Aether Runners battle formation for +2 movement on all of your ships. If you're looking to play heavy into Grunstock Thunderers, and I know a lot of KO players have a lot of Thunderers out there, you're going to take the extra range on your Thunderers. So whatever playstyle you want to play, you can find a battle formation for you. Personally, I really gravitate toward the Aether Runners battle formation, simply because I find strength in movement and options and open-endedness of the army. So +2 movement is going to open up a lot of avenues for that, especially when you get into some of their abilities like bombing runs and dropping bombs on people. And then also, I really do like the Endrineers Guild, because even though there's only 3, KO have always had some really cool, really interesting, really powerful artifacts. I don't think the other 2 are necessarily poor choices. And if you're playing a lot of sky vessels, maybe you do take the Iron Sky Attack Squadron, because now every ship that gets targeted is reducing damage by 1 in the face. They all have the armor. What's the Manfred's armor of Templehof, something like that, where he reduces the damage taken once per phase. Now all your ships have it. So not that I don't like the other 2, but those are the 2 that I gravitated immediately towards.
You asked me like that. I'm 2+ tough, mate.
I'm sorry.
Wrong channel. No, wrong channel. I was just, while you were talking, I was just bringing up the Grunstock gunners and just having a look to see what their range weapon is, because I always get nervous with a once per battle ability, right? So
Of course.
you've really got to make the most of it. Like, does 3 extra inches really make a big difference? And that's what I was just quickly having a look to see. What is the actual range? Because as you've mentioned, the range has gotten shorter across the board. So you'll notice, like, I've been playing Stormcast lately, and we all know long strikes are 30 inches. Not in 4th edition, it's 18. Now,
Right.
some people were not nearly as aggressive. Like, that's a big jump. But you have noticed that range has gotten shorter. So as I look at the gun hauler, for example, so when we're talking about the Grun's Corp wing, the carbines are 12, the sky cannon's 15, the drill cannon's 15. So if I'm adding 3 extra inches, that puts me to 18, which isn't too bad. But is it worth it versus the extra artifact? I think I'd personally prefer the extra artifact, unless I'm heavily investing in like unique heroes.
Right, exactly. So if you're bringing a lot of Thunderers or the gun haulers, then if you're bringing a lot of them, that's just a force multiplier for that. So it may be once per battle, but if you can activate that on a key turn and maximize that ability, then you're going to be able to make a big impact than maybe otherwise taking a reduced damage point a turn would be, because you're going to be able to drive home your strength at the right time, at the critical moment of the battle. So it really depends on your play style and what you're bringing in your list. And that's one of the great things about these formations.
The destruction player in me believes the best defense is offense. So you go with the +3 to the range over the ignore 1 point of damage. But if you're going heavy in your boats, then maybe the Iron Sky is for you. I think there's a lot of good options here, and we'll talk more about lists. I don't think there's a bad choice. When I look at all 4 of these, unlike, for example, my Stormcast, where I think some of them are bad choices. I think this is just whatever suits your play style. And actually, I wish some of my armies had lists that look like this.
KO players will agree with me. I think when you say a good offense is a good defense as a destruction player, KO players will say, well, good movement is a good offense.
True. True. Although I'm regretting or wondering how my Gargants are going to go without Finest Hour and some of these other defensive pieces like Mystic Shield. I'm like, oh, I'm going to handle this shooting. Artifacts. Speaking of artifacts, so we know there's one way you're getting a second artifact. Probably worth calling out there. Yeah, there's no warlord battalions anymore, so you can't get yourself an extra artifact at the moment. So it's either go that particular battle formation or you're picking one. So of the three here, this is heroic traits. Well, I'm jumping ahead. Jumping ahead.
I didn't want to call you out.
I should read. I should read and not just speak.
All good.
So on the screen we have our heroic traits. We know that regardless of your general, if they are warlords, if you take Brock, got to be general, but otherwise this doesn't have to go into your general. You've got Endrineer Maestro, which is going to add two to the range characteristic of range weapons. The infantry, wholly within 12. You've got your grudge bearer in the deployment phase. Pick an enemy unit, you're making a grudge on them, and double the damage characteristic. And then of the target, blah, 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 blah. And then you've got Cunning Fleet Master, where each time a friendly sky vessel wholly within 12 of this unit uses redeploy. By the way, there's a nice little change with redeploy because it no longer triggers when your opponent is within 9 inches. So you can tap into that without having to be, play the 9.1 game, which some people were like, I'm just going to be just outside of 9 inches to stop you from redeploying. Well, pros and cons. Your opponent can always do it to you, but at the same time, you don't have to rely on that particular trigger. Anyway, you get to roll 2 dice and pick the highest if you're doing redeploy. So of the three, what's first, second, third?
First, second, third. This is totally, obviously, my opinion based, but I think there's a case to be made for all of them. To be honest with you, I really do think, my opinion, my favorite is going to be Cunning Fleetmaster because of the less restriction on redeploy that you just spoke about. You can use this to your advantage in combination with Transport Skyfarers, right? So now, is there a bigger feel bad moment for somebody when you're like, all right, I'm going to redeploy and you roll the 1? Well, guess what? I have good news for you. You get an extra dice and you can choose whichever one you want. Typically, you're going to go with the higher one, right? But so having the flexibility to mitigate that potential downside of a D6 roll on an ability that has exponentially increased in availability of use is really important to me, especially combined with the strength of the army, which I feel is Transport Skyfarers. I will do a shout out to Endrineer Maestro because it synergizes well with the battle formation we just spoke about, the Grencore Wing, where you can increase the range. So now you've got 2 sources of increased range. One that's a static passive, and one where you can even take that further with an active ability like the battle formation. Grudge Bearer, also not terrible. I think there's an edge case to be made by giving Grudge Bearer to a dirigible suit engine master and turning him into this little heat-seeking ICBM. So I think there's a case to be made for all 3 of them. If I'm going 1, 2, 3, 1 Cunning Fleet Master, 2 Engine Maestro, 3 Grudge Bearer.
This is a theory I clearly haven't practiced and thought through properly, but I'm wondering in this particular General's Handbook, I wonder if Grudge Bearer is actually more of a 2, maybe even a 1. And I say that because you've got a battle tactic that's about killing a unit in the General's regiment. So it could be the General, it could be a supplementary unit that's sitting in the, depending on how we go with list building. Some people are going and avoiding anyone in the General, someone are maximizing the Honor Guard rule. And maybe, especially in a melee focused build, do you double down with the Honor Guard special assignment or priority target in addition to the Grudge Bearer? And does that help you, do you tap into that and build into that? Now, obviously, those rules don't going to benefit you if you're going to shoot. A lot of them require you to charge or something in the General's regiment. But I wonder if there's something in Grudge Bearer for this particular season. That's a thought, not a comment that I've practiced.
No, I agree. I think there's a lot of when you look at the open-endedness of Grudge Bearer when it just says attacks, that's both shooting and melee. When you look at some of these war scrolls, and the Admiral has a damage 3 hammer, now against a key hero he's damage 6. Or if you put it on the dirigible suit Engine Master, now his 6 attack weapon battery is doing a lot more damage at range. So I think there's a case to be made. I don't think you made a bad point there.
So, for example, right, and this is just me thinking my logic through. Priority target adds +1 to hit and +1 to wound rolls for attacks that made against the honor guard unit in the general's regiment, right? So, assuming that your opponent has something in their general's regiment, you would get +1 to hit and +1 to wound in both shooting and combat with the Grudge Bearer, which then adds an extra layer of abilities. Now, the risk here is that, for example, one of my lists that I'm practicing at the moment, my general, who's a War Master, has nothing in the regiment. So you would essentially lose your priority target benefit altogether. My point is that I don't think that Grudge Bearer is always going to be 3. Let's see how the meta kind of unfolds over the next couple of months to see
Great point.
if people avoid honor guard altogether with the general. This is the nothing. It stays at 3.
Great point. And I think that the diversity here really allows for flexibility over the course of a season or a rule set.
I agree wholeheartedly. All 3 of these are good. It just depends on your flavor and your style and what you're building around. None of these are actually bad. I would actually agree with you again. I think KO is so far doing quite well in the options department. Now we talk about the artifacts that I got a little ahead of myself with. So we do have the Void Stone Orb, where it's not quite spell in a bottle, where you can just unbound a spell just once per battle, flat, no dice roll, see you later, she's gone. You have the Celestian Burst Grenade, which is also a once per battle. In your shooting phase, you pick an enemy unit within 12 inches to be the target, and they can't use ward rolls. And then you have the name that I'm not going to read because I'll be here till Christmas, which is once per battle. Basically, it's the Mag Bolus, once per battle. I don't like all 3 of your artifacts are once per battle. I'm never a fan. But you pick a monster within 12 inches, and then until the start of your next turn, subtract 1 from the number of dice rolled when making a charge to a minimum of 1. So, first, second, third.
First, second, third, again, purely based on the units that I like, the things that I'm seeing in my personal play style. If you would have asked me a month ago, would I ever not take Voidstone Orb in a meta that included Blizzard? I would never write a list where Voidstone Orb was not present. It was an automatic take for me. And I think it has play in a meta where people are going to be casting endless spells and incarnates all over the place. However, Celestian Burst Grenade is a winner here for me. To be able to focus your power with the understanding that damage has decreased across the board, not only for KO, but for a lot of players, being able to remove ward saves. And maybe this is a little bit of my Magnecan bias coming out, where ward saves are immensely important there. But on a key hero, or a key unit that's been given a ward save, I see a lot of Slaves to Darkness players getting very excited and painting up their Vanguard and Chaos Knights, and getting ready to put ward saves on a lot of already tough pieces. Celestian Burst Grenade for me, number 1. Voidstone Orb, number 2, for the reasons of lots of incarnates are going to be flying around, lots of powerful endless spells are going to be flying around, and the Magbolas. I just love the name Drac Hobbler. Like, it just has this sort of, it evokes this sense of like you're hobbling, you're throwing these bolas around this mega gargan, and he's all hobbled and he's trying to break out of them like a Star Wars AT-AT from Empire Strikes Back, and then just falls over. Great visuals there, a lot of utility, but I think it can get lost if you play an army that if you're playing against an army that doesn't have a lot of monsters. And so that limited, I think I guess the same could be said against the Celestian Burst Grenade. I just happen to find, I think that's going to be a lot more powerful.
I agree with you. I agree. If it wasn't monster, I would say, yeah, it's a really good choice.
100%.
I think Grenade and the Orb are equal. I think it just depends on where the meta settles. if I was building a KO list today, I think I'm going Orb over Grenade.
Fair.
Just because I think people are going to be so excited running the Cron Spine as a free option that I think there's going to be flooded on the board. Now, I also don't believe it's the right endless spell. I think there's still better ones, whether it's more the Morbid Conjurations or Primal, or there's another one. Twilit Sorceries, I think, are probably the stronger of the three. But the fact that I can bring in a free Cron Spine, and I've actually played the Cron Spine last week, and it's pretty solid still for free. I can see that removal of it once per game. No, just as long as you're within 30.
If I can,
I'm torn.
Yeah.
I'm torn.
I know what you mean, and I've seen a few. I have not played a game of 4th edition. Actually, I'm going to be playing my first game of 4th edition tonight. I've watched quite a bit of 4th edition games, and I have seen a couple situations where trying to fit a Cron Spine that was successfully cast in an area because of its large base, you have to be outside of 9. So I think you can protect yourself against that in other ways. Rather, now if you get caught with your pants down and your Cron Spine's going to be right there in front of your key unit, then having a Voidstone Orb is going to be helpful. I think there is some levels of mitigation that you can employ to protect yourself against that. And I think that's maybe for me why the Pokeball, the Burst Grenade, edges it out, but we'll see. And the fact that you have options is great for KO players as we progress through the edition.
And as we know, there is a battle formation that allows us to do both. So
exactly, you can pick both of them, right? Like if you're like, God, I can't choose. What do I do? Woe is me. Hey, the Engineers Guild, boom, boom, take both.
If the Cron Spine settles down, I think the Grenade is 100% the right choice. I think right now you'll see an over-index of Cron Spines, because most endless spells are like 6 to 7 wounds. Yes, there's a couple of 10s and things like that, but most of them are pretty easy to kind of handle. So if you're worried about I don't know, any other Gnashing Jaws, for example, or some other type of thing, you can shoot off pretty easily. But it's like I think we're kind of standing. I think our points have been made. Right. Grenade and Orb are probably our 2 equal. Depends on where the meta is and our preference. But again, neither are a good or a bad. You go up against the bottom. For example, my Stormcasts have no ward anymore. Like, Hammers of Sigmar, 6-up ward on objectives doesn't exist. So I wonder, yes, there's going to be some like save stacking, for example, or ward stacking, like Slaves to Darkness can take a 6 to a 5 through the Eye of the Gods. But how many wards are out there? And if your opponent doesn't have wards, again, how valuable? It's a pros and cons thing. I think either way, there's no automatic pick here, which is a good thing.
Last thought, I want to pour one out for my homie, the Phosphorite Bomblets. Oh man, the times we've had. Cue the sentimental music. No love lost, I'm sure, from Kharadron Overlords opponents, but man, have we had some fun times.
Yeah, and also shout out to the Spell in the Bottle. I wouldn't hate you if you had Spell in the Bottle still and you could just pop out, I don't know, a Purple Sun again. I mean, I would. I'd regret it a little bit what I said, but it feels weird not having Spell in the Bottle. That feels like your thing. It was always fun.
Yeah, I agree.
So there's been a lot of War Scroll adjustments, right? And this is probably the moment where I want to talk a little bit about some of our favorite things. And now the benefit of hindsight is we do have a PDF, so I can bring it up and we can talk a little bit about some of the rules. But when you're looking at KO, has your list fundamentally changed where, in the past you were running frigates or Sky Wardens, and now you're like, I'm all in on gun haulers? Or like, what's glowed up? What's glowed down? Talk to me about this like it's the stock market.
All right. So if you're talking about what I was running for lists personally and how that's changed from 3rd to 4th or with this new index, I was running, like I mentioned at the beginning, or an Ironclad packed with as many engine riggers as I was legally allowed to bring, with some very key buff pieces, and then focusing the entire weight of my army in one specific point. I had so much fun. I apologize to all my opponents for doing that, but it was a lot of fun. Now, for me, it was a lot of fun for me. And so and it's not that the Arcanaut frigate was either a bad choice or even an unpopular choice in third edition. In fact, shout out to a SoCal local, Ian McLeese, who went 5-0 at the last LVO with several frigates in a build that involved them and their strengths. But when you look at Transport Skyfarers and how the assault boat rule works now, I think that is a huge winner with this index. I could either read it out, or I don't know if you can pull it up.
I'm gonna bring it up right now. Yeah,
That's awesome.
Talk to me about why you're liking the frigate. You have frigate, right?
Yes, the Arcanaut frigate. Yeah. So the assault boat rule. So the frigate is great. So there it is on screen. You can transport up to 2 units with a combined model count of 12. Right. That's going to be important when you're list building and thinking about your playstyle going into the game. It's got the carbines, which for the first time will reduce when it's taken damage, but still multiple shots at rend 1. 2 damage is going to be helpful, especially we can shoot in combat. I love the damage of the Sky Cannon, which hasn't reduced in range. That is Rend 2, D3 plus 1 damage. Solid damage profile, but my friend Coach, the sauce here, assault boat. And I say that with the caveat that assault boat lost half of its strength. It no longer does in third edition. It not only allowed you to do what it does here, but it also did impact mortals, right? It was a built-in battle ram. It lost that ability, and it's still that good.
I've noticed a few units that had something like that because mortal damage has been reduced. It feels like. Again, I'll go back to my long strikes, for example. No longer do mortal damage. There's a whole bunch of things where I've tried to charge and do mortals, and it no longer. Do Mega Gargants do it still? I think it might be a Rampage. I forget. I have to revisit my books, but there has been some of those changes as well. So glad that you're playing the same game as we are. But talk to me more about Assault Boat and why we like this.
So in your charge phase, you declare this ability, but you can't use this ability if you've run or retreated. But you can pick a number of units up to its transport capacity, wholly within 6, to be the targets, and then you essentially charge with the frigate, right? You're charging with the frigate. You remove the targets from the battlefield, and then this unit can make a charge move and then set up the targets that you picked wholly within combat range, and they get the strike first ability for the rest of the turn. And then the unit and the targets, this unit and the targets have charged. So essentially what you're doing is allowing and take this into consideration with the fact that reinforcing units has decreased. You can no longer double reinforce units like I used to with taking 2 units of 9 engine riggers in an ironclad. You can no longer do that. So it's a little bit more MSU, many or multiple small units. But what it does is it does not penalize you for the typical downside for taking smaller units, which is being able to hit with a smaller unit, but then allowing your opponent to strike back. That you could take 4 units of 3 engine riggers in a frigate, but then still be able to concentrate the full weight of their offensive power before your opponent gets to swing. And so I think that is quite powerful when you consider the open-endedness of the Transport Skyfarers rule, where you're going to be able to choose where those engagements happen more often.
And obviously just call out that it's your charge phase. So counter charge won't trigger here. So you can obviously still charge with it, but
my friend. However, I was just about to say,
I'm actually me on my channel. What is it? What have you got?
Actually, counter charge allows you to make a charge move as if it were your charge phase. So if you are, your screen gets charged, your frigate declares a counter charge. It counts as making a charge move as if it were your charge phase. You then go and do the assault bolt rule. So you get charged, but then you charge with your frigate and then do all the damage of everybody inside before your opponent gets to swing on their turn.
This is what I was looking for. Like I've actually been just flicking my pages looking for the exact wording for counter charge because it says your charge phase. So First off, your charge phase. And I was just like, please, like, I'm quickly trying to look through this rule. I can't find it. Of course, I find it right now. Literally right now, I find it. Counter charge, pick a friendly unit that is not in combat for this ability. Okay, cool. We know that. 2 command points. Very cool. You got that in the bank. This unit uses that charge ability. Oh, that's 4 to victory. Sorry. That unit can use a charge ability as if it was your charge phase. So there's our loop. There's our loop. There's our loop.
The code write poured through the dense book of the code and said, aha, actually, here it is.
Jerk.
So, but you can not only use this in your turn, but as a part of a counter charge, and therein lies the sauce of the frigate. And I think combined with the strength of both engine riggers and sky wardens, you'll find this to be very potent counterpunch.
What other war scrolls do we like? We can't sit here forever talking about the Arcanaut frigate. Any other ones that we stand out? Actually, you know what? I want to go to Brock. I want to talk Brock for a second. Brock doesn't get a lot of love.
Are you a mind reader? That's another absolutely where I was headed with this.
By the way, who was it? Not the chemist. I was looking through, like, because I was thinking about endless spells and thinking about wizards, and I'm like, how do I, as a KO player, handle this? Is it the Aether something? It's got has the ability to unbind as if it was
Navigator.
A wizard.
The Navigator.
The Navigator. That's what I was thinking of. There's right there. That was one of the things that I was looking through. Like, right, KO. If there's no artifacts that allows me to become a wizard, and I don't want to invest into getting a regiment of renown to get a wizard, outside of tapping into a place of power that allows me to act as a unbind as if it's a wizard, right, what other native things do I have? And it was, this was the Etheric Navigator was the only thing I could see that allows you to tap into wizards if you didn't want to go into the Voidstone Orb, or if you wanted something a little bit long term, like, right, you stop the Kronspine this turn, but then how do you stop it ongoing? So,
and we can stay on the Navigator for a second, because if you were going to ask me, I anticipated you asking me if maybe there was a unit that you were trending downward, if you were a little bearish on, to use your stock market analogy. It's not that I think the Navigator is bad. He is simply not as, I'm going to start my list at 1900 points because I've automatically included the Navigator in my list building as he was in 3rd edition. He's always been able to unbind as if he were a wizard. But the Read the Winds was so powerful in the last book. I think it's still very strong, but the main drawback here is that its range has been drastically reduced from 30 inches away to 18 inches.
18. Yeah.
In the previous book, go ahead.
That was a really good ability, the 1s and the 6s. But yeah, the 18 inches means that you're going to get probably at least one less turn. Yeah, you'll get at least one less turn out of it.
Not only that, Coach. And if KO players or opponents will have remembered, you rolled a bunch of dice, and the KO player was essentially fishing for 1s, which is odd to do, but you were looking for 1s because you could either choose the ability on the 1s or the 6s. Usually you're looking for 1s because you want to slow down your opponent's big threats. And not only would you, with the reduced range, be able to maybe use it a turn too late, or you might not be able to use it in the turn that you want to because of the reduced range. But how I used it was moving to one side of the board, slowing down the units in the back, and then shooting or charging the units in front of me. So I'm going to slow down the big counterpunch threats you have, and then force all my weight of power on the units that are either in front or the ones that I want to attack. And then when you go to counterpunch me, you might not be able to reach me. And then I just go to the other side of the board, and then I hit a tactic and an objective over here. And then it's this game of cat and mouse that has been slightly reduced, but you do get to choose both abilities. So if you roll 2 1s and a 6, not only can you add 3 inches to your move phase, but you also do get to use the slow ability. So there is a little good and a bad, but I think if I'm a little bearish on a unit, it's the reduction in range on slowing down an ability is something that I think brings it down a notch for me.
So this probably turns it down from an auto include. you wouldn't say that it's trash, right? Like, it's not like,
No.
it's going to retirement. It's just stopped being an auto include. The other thing I'd probably call out is the fact that now how regiments are built, if you want to reduce your drops, you are looking to minimize your heroes or find regiment leaders that can allow other heroes into it. By adding all of these small heroes, which KO was known for, right? You chuck in as many small heroes as possible, you are potentially going to be 5 drops. Now, for some people, they don't care about that. That's fine, whatever. For some other people, they are racing to the bottom, either 1 drop or 2 drops. So having this extra third hero, is this worth it for you? And that's a question that only you can answer if you value the unbind ability and the impacts to the reading the winds. And is it worth a drop for you?
Exactly.
Question. It's a question.
There's a lot more questions to be asked with the Navigator than previously was. Do I own this model in my collection, or where can I go and buy said model? Because like you said, it's no longer not include, certainly not trash tier, certainly not garbage, not staying on the shelf. Just there's more variability in its when you're finding it in the list.
Sitting in like an A or a B tier as opposed to S tier, like it's always
Absolutely.
in every list.
Absolutely.
Which here we are. Here is the man himself, Brock. So one big change, as we've already talked about, is the keyword is still a War Master. So if you choose it, has to be your general, no ifs, no buts. But you're no longer locked to a Skyport. So you can include it in any of 4 of those. Sorry, 4 battle formations. So you can potentially tap into them potentially, although you will find a lot of War Masters may not benefit. So just look at your keywords. What do we think about Brocky? Is it time? Is it time to bring Brock in?
Bullish. I am bullish on Brock. Again, continuing your stock market, which is kind of maybe a little apt to the capitalistic sky dwarves that we're talking about. I am bullish on Brock, and I utilized Brock, even though, like I said, Barrak Mornar, near and dear to my heart. I was a Barrak Nar player all of 3rd edition simply because Brock Grungson was locked to Barrak Nar, and his force multiplier abilities still remain as strong as they were. If not, maybe an argument can be made for stronger. So taking away his amazing utility, which we'll get to in a minute. Look at that damage profile, Coach. Okay. He's got the cannon, Grungson's boast. It's 1 shot, sure. 3s, 2s, Ren 2, D3 +3 at 18 inches. That's a cannon.
Can I pause you for a second?
Yeah.
Because when you read this for the first time, the first thing that I go to is Rend. And I'm like, Ren 2, Ren 1, so what? Then you catch yourself and remind yourself that there's no Mystic Shield, no Finest Hour. So at best, you're going to get an all-out defense, or if there's something that's, special, there might be other boosts, but most armies don't have an extra save boost. So actually, Ren 2 is pretty solid. Like Ren 2 is actually solid, and it's probably going to cut through. As long as you're not like me, who fails 3 wound on 2 rolls in a row of 1 with Indrasa's spear, yeah, you're good. That's a good profile.
Yeah, and then it just add a little bit of gravy, 6 shots at Ren 1, 2 damage, shooting combat. Like, I mean, he lost he lost 6 inches on the Magnate's charter, his weapon battery on his harness there, but it's everything else remained the same. He was always 3s, 2s, Ren 2, D3 +3. He was always 6 shots at 3s, 3s, neg 1, 2. He lost 6 inches on the range of the Magnate charter. Big deal. So again, I mean, that is somewhere in between a frigate and an ironclad's output, right? He's the 6 shots at Ren 1, 2 damage are in between the 4 and the 8 shots for the carbines for the frigate and the ironclad. So he's in the middle between those two. And then his the Grungson's boast is a better hit roll. It's a 3+, not a 4+. It's only one shot, but the frigate is 1 shot, the ironclad's 2, and the D3 +3 is an ironclad level damage profile, wounding on 2s at Ren 2. So just right. And then his Aethermatic Saw, 5 attacks, Ren 2, 2 damage. And for me, if you're one of those people that can roll 5s and 6s, go play Magakin or roll or play an army with a bunch of D3 damages. I cannot stand D3 damage. I'll use it if I have to, but I gravitate toward the consistency of 2 damage weapon profiles over D3. I'm happy that got changed. And then you go to his utility. The first rule of Grunkson. This used to be a command ability in the previous book. And he allowed, whenever he charged, he would give +1 attack. Now you simply pick 2 friendly Skyfarer units within combat range, add 1 to the attack's characteristic. Talk about a full force multiplier when we just talked about using Skyfarers. I'm sorry, Sky Riggers, either Sky Wardens or Engine Riggers in combat, charging in your opponent's charge phase, striking first. Now add +1 to attack to all their profiles in any combat phase, as you'll see on the top there, without spending a command point, which are so precious in this edition. Just great ability. Command the fleet. Again, this was another a command ability. Now it's just an ability where you can pick sky vessels wholly within 24 inches. Oh, that range is so good. That are not in combat, and they can use the run ability and still shoot and charge. So again, just great. So now combine that with Assault Boat. Now you can move, you can run, you can charge, and then you can still use your Assault Boat. And then again, have we gotten to the best part? The mustache-mounted Aether Blasters. Pew, 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 pew. D3 mortals. Mortal damage being reduced across the board. You got to roll a 2+ and a D3. It's essentially a 3-up roll, but you'll find that's very in line with every other ability. So just at the end of any turn, no other, he has to be in combat, no other qualifying criteria, just a nice little see you later D3 mortals. How many times I have finished off the last remaining wound or 2 on a Tyrant or nothing ever crazy, never taken down like a L'Oreal or Archaon with the mustache blasters. How glorious that would be. But it's just a little icing on the cake.
And plus, there's no inspiring presence now. So if you are locked, and there's been plenty of times where I've been playing 4th edition where I've locked somebody in with 1 or 2 wound idiots, like 1 or 2 models left.
Yeah.
And it's like you've run out of CP to use power through, or you're not eligible to use power through to just finish that unit off. So this being a free couple of chip mortal damage is not bad. Not bad. Does he have a ward? No ward.
He does not have a ward.
I would have expected like a War Master to have a ward. No ward. Oh.
8 wounds with a 3-up save and a 12-inch move, though. Those are some damn good base stats. 12-inch move, 8 health, 3-up save. Solid. -1 to hit if you're near a sky vessel. So again, there's a lot of built-in protection there.
And I will remind everyone, again, the combat phase ability here, which combines nicely with the current General's Handbook rule, whether it's tapping into how you're doing Honor Guard, getting potentially a boost as well in the charge, or if you are, some passive target. So some little combinations starting to form out of here already, and we're only just really scratching the surface. And again, for anyone who wants to go into every War Scroll, I'd highly recommend you go check out the Aethercast on YouTube. I'm sure they've got a podcast as well. I'm sure they're going to look at every single War Scroll. We don't have time to look at every War Scroll. We're just picking out our absolute favorites, and I do want to get into lists very soon.
Sure.
Maybe two other. No rush, but rush. I have to go back to work. Is there maybe 2 other War Scrolls that you're really high on right now?
2 other War Scrolls that I'm really high on. I guess it's hard to pick between the Engine Riggers and the Sky Wardens. I guess my bias is going to show through with the fact that I have 18 of them already painted and based, the Engine Riggers.
Pause.
Sure.
Anthony goes into his local hobby store today and is going to go pick up a box. And that box can be built as either Engine Riggers or Sky Wardens. Talked Anthony through which one or why I might build one or the other. Like, what's the key differences, or what are some of the things to consider when Anthony starts building those models?
The key differences in terms of a gameplay perspective are that Sky Wardens afford you a diversity of damage type, right? So they not only have the Sky Pike, which is rend 1, 2 damage, with 3s to hit, which is, again, that is a great profile in 4th edition. 3s and 3s to hit at Rend 1/2 damage, but then they have the crit mortal. So not only are you doing decent damage, but you've got the crit mortals on top of that. So Sky Wardens offer you a diversity of damage type within one singular unit. The Engine Riggers allow you a little bit more flexibility because they can perform emergency field repairs, where you can make a repair roll, and on a 4-up, you heal 4 or 5, you heal 1. On a 6, you heal 2. And of course, we're talking about repairing sky vessels within combat range. So a little different here because it's at the end of any turn, whereas last edition, it was... God, the ability to use this at the end of any phase was incredible because you would get shot. Your Ironclad would get shot, and then at the end of the shooting phase, you'd simply repair all the damage. And then they're like, well, I'm going to shoot you, and then I'm going to weaken you, and then charge you, and then finish you off. But then before they could charge, you just fix the boat. I just love that the Engine Riggers are basically they're little engineers. They got their saws and their rivet guns, and they're cutting sheet metal and they're nail rivet gunning sheet metal and repairing the boat. But then somebody comes and takes a swing at them, so they start popping off with a nail gun and fighting with their handsaw. It's really great. So, but if the difference between the two there is the Engine Riggers allow you a little bit of healing, a little bit of defensive, a little bit of recovery, whereas the Sky Wardens offer you damage in 2 different forms.
Love it. And obviously the time charge is so impactful, especially if you're building into a little bit more melee focus. So yeah, I like that. And probably another good call out there is the retreat piece, is that normally you would take damage when you retreat. The Sky Wardens obviously allow you to ignore that on a 2-up if you're using the time charge rule. Not a regular retreat, just the time charge retreat. Not
Absolutely.
bad. Especially with what, 2 wounds? They're 2 wounds each. Yeah, they don't have a lot of wounds. They can't afford to take the D3 mortal damage.
Exactly. And with only a 4-up save, that profile hasn't changed. The 12-inch move, the 2 wounds, the 4-up save, they've always been that way. However, whenever they were in the boat, in the sky vessel previously, they were always +1 to save. Now losing that defensive buff, the time charges definitely offer a little bit of protection there. So absolutely.
All right. What's your last favorite child that you want to talk about? And then we'll get into lists.
Okay. Let me think here. My last favorite child, I think that I would be remiss if I didn't talk about Drecky Flint. My boy Drecky. Now, losing the light-fingered rule where he just did the old Simpsons bit, yoink, and just you took one of your artifacts away on a 3-up. Oh my God, how it's just, you've got one of a callback to 2nd edition when he had the Aether Quartz brooch, or the ethereal amulet, and Drecky Flint would be yoink. Just take.
What's your favorite? What's your favorite thing you stole?
I love. Man, it put me on the spot here. I can't think of anything at the moment, but it's just pouring one out for the homie. But however, when you take Drecky Flint, you pick one of your frigates, and we already mentioned the power of the frigate to be the Aceling, which is his flagship. Now, she can handle it. Passive ability: reroll, run, and charge roll for the Aceling. Just solid. No, you obviously have to be in combat range, but no other requirements, no dice roll, no resource, just reroll, run, and charge rolls. It doesn't limit you to your charge phase. You can use this as a counter charge with the assault boat in your enemy's charge phase. You fail that, they're staying away from you. Oh, I'll make sure I'm going to stay 9 inches away from that frigate. Go ahead and spend your 2 CP. Well, now your 9-inch counter charge, as opposed to going to about a 25% probability of making that 9-inch charge, goes to about 50-50, about a 48% there. No resource, no dice roll. It's just stacking the strengths of the frigate. It's adding a layer of mitigation against your opponent's tactics, minimizing your strength, but then bringing that back to equal footing. Love the model, love his lore. And then if you happen to be in combat with a monster, boom, 2-up, just an extra D3 mortals. Just really great. I mean, his weapons are no slouch. 2d6 shots that do 2 damage, solid, and then 4 attacks that do 2 damage with a 3-up save and 6 health. He's just a great character. Love the lore. Love the she can handle it rule.
I love that. The amount of times I've already failed, I've said this a few times, I've failed at least 2 5-inch counter charges already. And it's a feel bad when you spend the 2 CP to counter charge. That's like 50% usually of your CP for the round. And you can't use a reroll, right? So getting a reroll here, if you're building into your frigates and this is a strategy for you, this feels like a don't leave home without it.
No longer locked to Barrak Mornar. So just great. Just a great hero. He's pointed at the same as an admiral, which is not that bad considering 4th edition points. So he's not like some exponentially expensive character that you're paying for. It's just, yeah. And like I said, the model is fantastic. So
because this is my channel, I'm going to cheat and I'm going to make you talk about one other unit.
please.
And that is going to be the humble Arco Company. And
okay.
the reason I want to talk Arco Company for a second is that one of the other big changes is that I've probably skipped it already. One of the big changes is that I've definitely missed it. One of the big changes is the fact that we are no longer locked to battle line. And the Arco Company would be traditionally one of the ways we would fulfill that unless you would unlock, gun haulers or some other type of, here we go. So without that restriction now of battle line requirements, is there still a role and a world where I'm taking Arcos? Am I taking them in big numbers? Am I just taking them in minimums? Like what's the thinking here around the Arcanaut Company?
Absolutely. So there is absolutely a place for Arcanaut Company. And when we talk about lists, you'll see that even I have built them into lists. They're a staple of the army. If you have them in your collection, incredible models, super fun to paint, and you're going to find a use for them. So the big change is that their hand weapons doubled in the number of attacks. They went from 1 attack. Not the most insane profile at 4s and 4s, no rend 1 damage, but they have doubled the amount of attacks. They are one of their other stats that is great, that is not on the screen, is their points cost. 10 Arcanaut Company with a 4-up save gets you, are only going to cost you 110 points.
That's not bad.
In 4th edition, that is a great points cost for such a well-rounded unit. They get a bonus to hit if they're targeting an enemy unit that's contesting an objective. And you can pack 40 attacks for just over 200 points that get a built-in +1 to hit if you're targeting an enemy unit that's on a point that you probably want to take anyway. They've got the Skyhook, which is a nice little utility. Rend 3 against monsters. Yes, please. And so the Sky Pike is, man, the Sky Pike, people underestimate the Sky Pike so much. Again, not a world beater profile, but when in a unit of 20, when you've got 4 attacks, let's say you've got a unit of 20 in combat with something that is on an objective, 4 attacks at 2s and 3s, rend 1, 2 damage, crit mortal. People underestimate the Sky Pike all the time. So I'll sing their praises. You'll see them in a list. There are multiple ways to benefit the Arcanauts Company's utility. And they're always, if you go to KO forums, if you go to the KO coach Discord, hell of a Discord channel, by the way. Everybody in that channel has been so uplifting and positive and helpful to new players and veterans alike. Everybody sings the praises of Arcanaut Company. And it's just this little thing that you can't see on the stats. They don't have the rend 2/3 damage. They don't have the 3-up save. They don't have the 12-inch move, but they've got heart, right? And they always seem to just overperform, and they have a great points cost. Solid unit.
Yeah, I would definitely take them because without something like this, you don't have bodies, right? You can't go all in on boats and balloon boys because you're just not going to have bodies to contest the objectives. Now, yes, you could argue just shoot them off the board and they'll have nothing to contest with anyway. I would at least, if I was building a KO list, I would at least have 1 unit of Arco Company, at least.
Yes.
Probably 2, or at least a reinforced unit of 1, but I would still have to take 1 unit of Arcanaut Company. I think they are worth it, especially in a volume game as well. You know, if something like Nighthawk pops up, and again, where lists go without having to have Inspiring Presence, for example, and not having to worry about Battle Shock. Will we see hordes like zombies and squigs and cities? Will they start popping up and gits? I need volume as much as elite critical damage. So having these brings that to my list.
Absolutely. Never going to let you down.
But I say that I'm not a KO player. So I probably
Also-
should, because I probably would learn how not to just always charge all the time. But that's a
Also,
destruction thing.
ask any competitive player going to a tournament, hey, you know, would you play an army that is fragile and has no screens? I mean, that's a great way to underperform just whatever your expectations are. Screens in a fragile army are always important, and they may take some hits to the face, but they're going to get their usefulness back.
I may or may not have included 2 units of Griffhounds in my Stormcast list for that exact reason. And talking to Jordan, Seasons of War, he Slaves the Darkness, has 2 units of Furies. So having some screens is really important right now. So I'd highly recommend it. But what I do want to recommend is 2 other lists. So Matt has been kind to start showing off not the perfect list. It's not the glory 5-0 list. It's how do we bring our ideas and our thoughts and start testing them on what does potentially an army look like, and unpack that a little. So first one is going to be an Aether Runners list. It is 1990 points. We have gone Regiment 1, which is Brock. The frigate with the sky cannon. We've got 2 units of reinforced engine riggers. Then we have Regiment 2, which includes the Etheric Navigator with the Cunning Fleet Master trait, the Celestian Burst Grenade as the artifact. We have a frigate with the sky cannon. We have a engine rigger reinforced and a unreinforced unit of Sky Warden. So it's a 2-drop list, 1990, obviously no prayer, no spell, no manifestation law. So talk to me about when you built this list. What are you trying to achieve? How does it work? Why 2 drops, not 4 drops? Like, talk to me about the thinking here.
So the thinking here is to maximize the effectiveness of the assault boat rule and the power of engine riggers in both their Ren 2 damage profile, which is just super solid. And then also combine that with the Arcanaut frigates assault boat rule, like I mentioned, and then with the force multiplication ability of Brock Runson. So you're just piling this layer cake of synergies and force multipliers on top of each other. And this list can do a lot of damage in a very concentrated, delivered, purposeful, calculated manner. This list will struggle to fight for points that it doesn't just absolutely dominate. But what I think it does make up for in flexibility, what it lacks in flexibility, it makes up for it in damage and just straight up fun. I just think this looks like a blast to play. So as we talked about, Brock is going to pick 2 units and he's going to just give them +1 attack. So engine riggers with a profile of 3 attacks apiece. By the way, that's a big change that we didn't mention earlier. They went from 2 to 3 attacks. They increased attacks in this index. 3 attacks at Ren 2, damage 2. Not to mention just their casual 3 shots with their rivet guns that are Ren 1/1 damage. A nice little icing on the cake there. But Brock is going to take them to 4 attacks each at Ren 2 damage. And they're cheaper than Sky Wardens. They're cheaper than Sky Wardens by 20 points, I believe. I think the engine riggers are 130. The Sky Wardens are 150. So just like I said, you're piling buffs, you're piling force multipliers, you're piling synergy on in a little bit in eco. I'm an ecologist and an arborist, and we talk a lot about diversity being resilient. A diverse ecosystem is a resilient ecosystem. A diverse tree palette is a resilient one. This is a little bit trending on a monoculture with mostly engine rigger. So things that are strong against engine riggers are going to be very strong against this list, but a smart KO player is going to be taking advantage. I love the Celestine Burst Grenade. Got a problem unit, got a 5-up ward pack of Chaos Knights. Boom, ward's gone. You move in with your strength. Redeploy. We talked about the strength of redeploy and transport Skyfarers. This hedges against a poor redeploy rule. Lot of shooting, a lot of melee, a lot of movement. That's this list.
Yeah, it's super elite when you look at it, right? You've got what Endrin Riggers are 6 bodies, Endrin Riggers 6 bodies, Sky Wardens 3 bodies. Like, yeah, it's super elite when it comes to your build. Obviously, you can go even more elite if you had like a gun hauler and things like that, but you don't have a lot of fat, but you have very much concentrated attack. And this feels like 3rd edition KO. This feels like concentrated force, go in, blast your opponent, and then go to the bar and have some quick drinks because other people are still playing their round.
Buy your opponent a drink that you owe them.
Or it doesn't work well for you, so then you're now getting punched in the face hard.
This is a little bit of my 3rd edition bias coming through, Coach. I don't blame you for but this is very similar to a list, except there's no Ironclad here that I've been playing in 3rd edition. So again, it's a little bit of my I'm just not ready to let go of that play style just yet. But and one thing you'll notice is that there's 12 engine riggers with the frigate and Brock Grunson, right? So you can't transport both units of engine riggers and Brock at the same time, but Brock having a 12-inch move and a 3-up save, I'm not entirely worried about him falling behind like I am the Navigator, and that's why there's less bodies there, so the Navigator can hitch a ride.
Yeah, really good call. And this might be a nice way for people to transition from 3 to 4 with something that feels familiar. I was going to say similar and familiar, and made up a word that combined the two somehow. But I guess, without that impacts of a double turn, or if you do take the double turn, know that you're probably going to drop those 4 battle tactics points. It's up to you.
Creating words by combining 2 is all the rage. We talk about synergy all the time, which is synchronized energy. I mean, that's where the word synergy comes from, is synchronized energy. So you know what? Your Semififfler will, I'm sure it'll catch on.
There's a merch t-shirt ready to go. Ready to go. Here I am thinking of stuff around like I'm the underdog or some type of underdog shirt. Nope. Let's work completely with the new word. Speaking of we have the Endrineer Guild Expeditionary Force.
You did it.
No, oh geez, yeah. There's a participation award. Similar to drops. And by the way, something on drops, and I've seen this discussion happening a lot. And as I've seen 4th edition lists being built prior to it coming out, but also even now that the information is out, what you're starting to see is you're probably seeing in most cases a lot of armies are sitting around the 3-drop mark. So you being 2 drops in both of your lists is going to give you a really good chance of determining who goes first, who goes second. So Matt, maybe before we get into the second list,
sure.
If you had the choice, would you be taking first or second in the average battle plan?
This may be a little bit of my lack of 4th edition experience. I know a lot of people have gotten some decent amount of 4th games in. Maybe you haven't. I'm not one of those people. So I typically, as a Kharadron Overlords player, give away priority because I want to control the flow of the battle as much as possible. And again, we mentioned at the very beginning of the show that in previous editions, KO have been punishing on the offense on winning the priority roll and taking a double turn. I can foresee situations where you want to mitigate the damage done against KO army by getting double turn because of the losing the +1 save from being inside the boat, because your units are on the battlefield now, right? They're not safely hidden away in the stores of a sky vessel. So I think this is just mitigation against being doubled, rather than previous editions where you would want to apply your thumb down on the screws when you want.
My question to everybody listening to this is, if you are going to, if you're thinking about this, right, I would tend to agree with you. My thing is, what's the first battle tactic you want to score? And in most cases, the ones that are probably the ones that you want the most would be seize the center or take the flanks. Now, you could do take their lands, but I feel like that's really a turn 5 kind of one you want to go for.
Yeah.
Do I want to put 2 units in the center and now I'm in easy charge range? I don't know if that's the right answer, or if I'm giving away the first turn and they seize the center, then how am I going to seize it back? And that might be an interesting little consideration for you. Alternatively, my question to you would be, how do you take the flanks with this type of thing? And, is there should I add 2 gun haulers in my list? So the gun haulers take the flank, then kind of come in, and then the rest of my forces operating, as per normal. Questions, have a consideration of what that looks like for you.
And I'll say, with that in mind quickly, if you'll recall, flying high, the battle trait is a deployment phase ability. And so when you put it up, you just have to make sure that, you're not banking on setting up your unit in the turn and then going for take the flanks, because they cannot be set up that turn. But so just keep that in mind.
Correct. Yeah, I've learned that the hard way with Stormcast. We're like, yep, cool, going to drop down my 2 units of prosecutors. Oh, wait, I can't do that because they set up. So if I'm going to go for that, I'm going to deploy them 1 turn in advance before that one.
Exactly. Plan ahead.
Yeah, just some considerations because, just some thoughts. And speaking of other thoughts, we talked about the this list, explanatory force list. Same deal. We've got the Archanaut Admiral, which is the general. You've got the Cunning Fleet Master and the Voidstone Orb. You've got yourself a reinforced unit of Arco Company. You've got a reinforced unit of Thunderers, and you've got a Ironclad with the Sky Cannon and the collapsible compartments. We'll have to remind people what that is because we didn't talk about the Ironclad in our last discussion. Regiment 2, you've got the Code Right, another unit we didn't talk about, so maybe some highlights of the Code Right, where you've got the Celestial Burst Grenade, the second artifact, the Sky Cannon attached to the Archanaut Frigate, the unit of reinforced engine riggers, and then an unreinforced unit of engine riggers. This is 2K on the nose. So talk to me about this list. How is it different? What does it do? And what else do I need to know?
Very contrastingly from our first list, this is a more diverse palette. There's damage coming in several different forms here, which will allow you to be more resilient against many more archetypes of lists that you're going to be facing. So quickly, you no longer get to just choose sometimes people call them boatefacts or boat traits. Like the battle ram, the collapsible compartments, only the Ironclad can take these special engine works now. There's one that allows you to add 2 to the move characteristics, synergizing with the battle formation that gives you another 2. There's the repulsion field, which turns the Ironclad into a wizard for the purposes of an unbind. And then this one allows you to add 1 unit to the total number of units and 10 models to your transport capacity. So the Ironclad can then transport 4 units and up to 32 models. Okay. So what that allows you to do is play around a little bit with who's going who's going where. As you can see in the Ironclad, you'll have 20 Archanaut Company, 10 Thunderers, and a hero. So you got 31 models being moved around by the Ironclad. That is heavy weight being moved around. And so what this list does is it's going to allow you to deploy your Archanaut Company into a key position. The Admiral, which we didn't talk about, has a neat ability to boost the score, the control score of Archanaut Company by D6, which is interesting. The Code Right
control score is 1, right? The regular Arco Company's control score is only 1.
There's control 1, but it's to the unit, not to so you're not, so each Arcanaut company doesn't count as 3. It's their
No, of
number.
course not.
Okay, all right. I was just making
No. What I'm saying, like Twitter, I know Twitter when they're doing some like mad maths, are like, oh, if I add 3 to the control score, then a 1 turns to 4. I've got 10 models in the unit. Now it's a 40 control. No, it doesn't count as 40. It is your number plus at the end. Like
guilty.
maths,
I'm guilty. I did that with the Blight King rule where they get to add 3, and I was like, oh my god, they count as 5 on objectives. Like holy. And so no, so guilty. No, but
you
I
guys try
know.
to squeeze every bit of the juice from the lemon.
Yeah, so they can. So the Arcana Admiral can add D6 to the control score, and he can do that every turn. The Code Ray has got several abilities he can choose from. He can pick, which is neat. He can pick up to 3 visible KO units to target, no range, because he can see them. If he can see them, he can choose up to 3. Where you can seek new prospects, add 2 to the control score, or you can roll a dice on a 3-up. You pick. I'm sorry. On a 3-up, you have to pick one of the following abilities: add 2 to the control score, add 1 to run and charge rolls, and then no damage if you retreat. So you can't pick multiple. You can't do one ability for one unit and then another ability for another unit. But if you're trying to get your frigate in your ironclad into position, add 1 to the run and charge rolls, or you want to pile on with the control score. So now it's D6 plus 2 on top of the Arcanauts control score. Great synergy there. We talked about why Arcanauts are great. A reinforced unit of Thunderers. Thunderers are quite interesting, where they were oppressively powerful in 3rd edition, with up to bonuses of Ren 2, Ren 3, going to Ren 4, Ren 5, damage 3 cannons. I'm not ready to put them in a tier yet. I need to use them on the tabletop. Their ranges are generally reduced. Their damage is reduced. The cannons in particular going from Ren 2 flat 3 down to a Ren 1 D3. It's a major hit to damage. I have faith in GW's rules teams that they've done this. 18-inch range is still great in 4th edition. Having a reinforced unit of Thunderers will give you a total of 8 Rend 1 D3 damage shots at 18. That's nothing to sneeze at. And then if you're targeting a unit of infantry, you're talking about 20 Rend 1 damage 1 shots, Rend 2 if you're shooting against infantry. So 20 Rend 2 shots against infantry. Again, nothing to sneeze at. What this gives you, though, is it lets you put control score where you need it. It lets you then fend off a threat at range with the Thunderers. You can stop a key spell like an Incarnate coming in with the Voidstone Orb. The Code Right is buffing your key pieces. And then you still have the frigate with 9 engine riggers countercharging where you need it, or using the assault boat rule. So this list has a little bit of everything. It's got a great diversity of damage, a great diversity of abilities. It can play the objectives more. It has more board presence. So you get to use more of your toys. You're not just pulling out frigates and riggers. Right? It's not a frigorist. It's a Admirth Compo Thunderclad right rigger list. So that was a terrible joke. I'm sorry. I apologize to your viewers. I tried to force something there and I just couldn't give it. So anyway, moving on.
All I was going to say, I was just, when you were making up a bunch of words, I was doing the mental maths on the deck sweeper, and if infantry, and I can see there's a lot of infantry in the game, and a lot of heroes have the infantry keyword as well. So don't just think of them as like your save up 6 wound idiots. Right. Like infantry is very, very prevalent. Now, I think you're also going to see a lot of cavalry hitting the tables, and there are some really interesting infantry lists being built that I've kind of seen across the board. And the deck sweeper is something, and if you reinforce it, getting essentially 10 attacks, 3s, 4s, Rend 2 into infantry for 1 damage, plus you can shoot in combat. That's a nice little volume game there you've got. So I actually don't mind that at all. I can see why you consider that.
And then the Fumigator has the same profile. So in a unit of Thunderers, if you go from max special weapons, you'll have one Fumigator and one Deck Sweeper, which have the same profile. So in a unit of 5 Thunderers, you'll have 10 shots and if you're targeting infantry, will be Ren 2 1 damage. In a reinforced unit of Thunderers, you'll get 5, 10, 15, 20 shots at Ren 2 targeting infantry.
Yeah, because it says two in every 5 models can replace their Aether Shot rifle with a Etheric Fulminator or Deck Sweeper. So actually, yeah. So wow. So you'd go from so even an MSU unit just having 2 of those 10 attacks would be a nice little low investment, potentially high value into infantry. But if you see a real infantry meta kind of unfolding, then a reinforced unit. Yeah, okay.
And then we didn't talk about it, but I won't spend too much time. The Gun Hauler has a transport capacity of 1 unit and 5 models. So Gun Hauler and a 5-man unit of Thunderers can be a nice little strike team. And the Gun Hauler is the only of the sky vessels that has access to the drill cannon, which is Ren 3 flat 3 damage at 15-inch range. 1 shot, but 3s, Ren 3 damage, just 3s across. They're Space Marines, right? They're space. So you got 3 to hit, 3 to wound, 3 Ren 3 damage, 15-inch range, and then 5 Thunderers inside. Yes, please.
Yeah, that's brutal. That is brutal. And I love that you keep bringing up different units, because ultimately, again, it doesn't feel like there's going to be one list that rules them all. And I'm sure if we were going to a tournament, in the near future, there's a lot of different builds, right? There's a lot of different things where you want to go all shooting and maximize. If there's going to be the combat focused build, there's obviously regiments of renown we could potentially tap into. There's so many things you could possibly do. It does feel like the Wild West, which is really exciting. And I'm curious to see how the meta unfolds and some of the heroes that we haven't spoken about just yet that are going to step up there. You know what? We didn't put enough emphasis on the code, right? But he is OP. I'm not saying it is, but there's going to be little surprise packets where we haven't put a full appreciation into that. I'm all for exploring.
Absolutely. Great model too. Like literally the mascot of KO players who's pointing at a rule book and slamming his fist on the table. Just so epic.
I've got some Discord questions for you to bring us home, and I hope you're ready. Are you ready for this one? All right. So I'm going to start off with an easy one, actually, a hobby one. And I actually really like this one, coming from Manfred in Discord, saying flight stands are getting a bad rep. What are your favorite alternative builds that you've seen for balloons and boats?
So if you are not interested in trying to homebrew a hobby related solution to that, there are companies that can provide alternative flight stands that use very strong magnets and acrylic rods. And I think there's one particular company that started around the time Kharadron Overlords were released, because the flight stands are a little flimsy. I'm sure if you do a little Googling, you can find the solution. However, I find I love hobbying. I love kit bashing. My suggestion would be to express yourself and your creativity by, carefully drilling into your models in precise places using brass rods you can get at Home Depot or Lowe's if you're American, or any sort of hardware store, and then pinning them to really cool terrain features. If you can attach this brass rod to your model and then pin that so it's flying by, not flying high, a Realm Gate, from Games Workshop, or so many infinite available options on 3D printed terrain. I myself used what's the Shatter? Is it the Shatter Dominion kit with the pyres and and the pillars? And so I have all my engine riggers sort of parkouring off of pillars and pyres, and so without using those flight stands, you can really express your creativity, sell a theme of your army, and really have some fun with it at the same time. Or you can go with, again, no shame in the game, just use a alternative flight stand.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot.
Magnets.
I mean, And I mean, you could always just, use some cotton wool and create some clouds as well, which also works.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Like, I'm not the biggest flight stand kind of person. Mine are always attached to like Azerite ruins and things like that. To your point,
Exactly.
Yeah, I like that a lot. 3D printing has changed the game. Like, there's so many cool. Actually, I was looking at some Space Marine jump pack kind of things. Like, you could have your Sky Wardens using those type of little, like, I don't know what they're called. Like little, it's like a little burst of air, and
Yeah.
it shoots up. So
absolutely. Infinite possibilities.
yeah, love it. So it's Brench saying, how has the experience changed from the other side of the table? Do you think, actually, because you haven't actually experienced this just yet, do you think this is going to be a much more enjoyable army to play into? I'm going to say possibly, and I say that because people don't enjoy KO, not because of KO. People don't enjoy KO because of the uninteractivity that is doubled down with the double turn. That's a lot of doubles in one statement, right?
Double,
Nobody
double.
likes, like, when you win the priority roll and you stop the double turn, it's okay. Like, playing KO is actually a fun game when it's you go, I go, you go, I go. But the minute that double turn comes into play, and again, without Finest Hour, without Mystic Shield, how much can I handle that particular double turn? Doesn't mean double turns aren't going to happen. People are going to take the double turn because they want to cripple you, and the 4 victory points you're dropping from not being able to pick a battle tactic is worth the investment overall. So I'm not saying it's not going to happen, but I think there's an interesting trade-off here. And I think that might make it a much more interactive experience with KO. Thoughts?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And shout out to Bren. He is one of the kindest, most ready to help anybody, whether it's competitive or new player, in your Discord, in the KO Discord. Super awesome guy. I hope I get a chance to meet him in real life and give him a big old bear hug. So playing against KO is going to be a more enjoyable experience. Being from California, the only double that I want to see is from In and Out. I don't want to see the double interactivity of the double turn, and that's like you mentioned. So now in 4th edition, not only are you going to be able to not lose track of your opponent's models because they're on a sideboard, they're on the board, but there's not as much oppression as there once was with just massive rend stacking and high rend and damage. And then and then again, the fly high ability that used to exist where you would just simply put your army in front of your opponent, shoot, take the double turn, shoot again, the game's over. That will not be, I don't see that being a popular experience if you play against KO. So revisit your thinking if you're paired up against them at a tournament.
I'm glad you said that, because I was going to say Fly High is going to add to that experience, the changes to Fly High. The other thing that I know, because it happened to me at LVO where I actually played KO. So I played 4 destruction armies at KO. I played 4 destruction armies at LVO, and then KO was my other game. So my Gargant survived a double turn. I'm like, yes, cool. I'm going to slap. But now I've got to look forward to Unleash Hell on top of, as you said, the 4-up rally stuff. So it was like, being able to survive and then slap back. I've always said, you got to take the punch and then punch harder. There's a few of those little tools like no Unleash Hell now. Yes, there's Cover Fire. It's a little different. Again, I'm not saying that it's going to be perfect. I'm not going to say that it's now this magical, wonderful, we're going to run around in the garden and dance around in the meadows. But I think the experience is going to be better. And I also think because some of the ranges are shorter, you've got to put more skin in the game, especially with objectives getting smaller too. So
yeah, no, it's going to be a much more combined. I mean, obviously you saw an example of a list that's not so combined arms, but I think as the meta develops and 4th edition unfurls, you're going to find KO armies be much more combined arms.
A couple of other burning questions, and then we'll kind of bring things home.
Sure.
Grunbag's asking, with the shooting nerf in 4th edition, what do you think Kharadron is going to need to be more melee focused? And don't say Gotrek.
No. But the days of boat trek lists are a thing of the past. I will say, with reduction in range and damage across the board for shooting, which I think is a healthy thing for the game overall, even if it is a little disappointing as a KO player, leaning into either the assault boat rule and the interactivity with countercharge that you saw with frigates, or the massive carrying capacity of an ironclad to deliver a large amount of units wherever you need them to, is what you're going to want to lean into.
Yeah, I love it. I think the other thing as well is leaning into the mobility of this game. So like I played, oh God, it was a Scorched Earth. I played a battle plan last weekend where it's 8 objectives.
Right.
And that is really hard to defend against, right? Like, you know, I can castle up. So let's say, for example, it's you and me, right? Stormcast versus KO, or Daughters of Cain, or whatever army I'm running, right? If I'm against KO, I'm like, right, I'm going to castle up. I'm going to protect my heroes. I'm going to do whatever, right? Sure, I might castle up, but if I'm spread across 4 objectives on my territory, or 4 objectives in your territory, you just pick the weak spot. You go steal the objectives I can't control. Or alternatively, I stretch myself out, and now you've created weaknesses and opportunities to strike, and you use your surgical knife to kind of take me out. So you have always been a movement game first, and I'm looking forward to seeing how that plays out, because there's a lot of things in this game that have changed, and yeah,
Top
I don't know where
players
I'm
will
going.
top players will tell you that the most important stat in this game is movement.
Yeah.
Top players will always say that.
It's a movement game. It's a movement game. Anywhere you can run and charge, or retreat and charge, or anything that's movement based is super valuable. I had a train of thought that I kind of lost mid sentence. So thank you
I
for saving me on that one.
I gotcha.
Do you think, so Fitzy's asking, do you think that the new cover rules are going to have a big impact on KO and other shooting armies? So not getting the +1 to save, getting -1 to hit.
It is a little disappointing to lose that +1 to save, although I feel like it was a bit of a crutch, you know, where you could always count on your +1 save and then an all-out defense to basically protect you against most rend. Unless somebody was pulling out rend 3 or 4 against you, you were getting, you know, your base save. I think without that crutch, it's going to make you play smarter, plan better. It'll make you a more well-rounded player. You won't make that same mistake again, right? Is sort of the situation you're going to find yourself in. I think it might be a little bit of a rule you're going to have to make sure you remind your opponent about. But in the long run, there'll be a little bit of pain for KO players losing that +1 save. But in the long run, it will better your play.
Are there any heroes which you feel like will be must-haves in your list? Sorry, I was like connecting words into a sentence. So are there any heroes that are must-includes in your list? And then heroes that you don't think will see the table? And then in brackets, they said, except for the code right. Well, we've shown a list with the code right.
Yeah, I don't hate the code right. I don't think his abilities are maybe as potent as people were either hoping for or thought. I think you're going to see a lot of Brock. He's very powerful, lots of force multipliers like we talked about. The Admiral has just some great damage and really neat abilities. You're always going to find the Admiral in lists. I think somebody you're going to see less of in 4th edition is the Chemist. We didn't talk about the Chemist. He still buffs rend of your infantry units. However, it's on a 3-up now. So paying 140 points where the only thing he does not literally, but the reason why you're taking the Chemist for the rend buff doesn't work 33% of the time. And where points are tight and point costs across the board, across the game are going up, I struggle to find a place for him where out of 5 turns, 2 of those turns it's not going to work. So I think it's going to be hard pressed unless you're just leaning into Thunderers heavy and you're just that rend buff is going to be exponentially powerful. I don't think you'll see him in as many lists.
Yeah, both of the abilities on the chemist are 3-up. So, I mean, if you think you can roll a 3-up at a critical moment, then go for it. But yeah, I tend to agree. Like, if I'm building and you're so limited to capacity on boats, I want much more guarantees if I'm going to put my
Right.
skin in the game. So yeah,
Absolutely.
I tend to agree. Last question, and then I'll let you wrap up. Is do you think there are any other regiments of renown choices, or are you considering any regiments of renown? And I'll be honest, I haven't spent a lot of time on regiments in order. I mean, Neve Black Talon is one that I think is worth considering. The Stormcast little combination.
Mhm.
If you want wounds, Gargan, bringing in a Gargan is always nice. Getting in a Bundo Whalebiter. But do you have any? And obviously Gotrek as well, who's definitely changed a little for the better, but still a bit
Yeah.
of a beat stick.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be very candid and forthcoming here. I have not looked at regiments of renowned really a lot. I know a lot of I've in my busier work days lately, I've skimmed the Coach KO Discord and people are very excited about Bundo. It brings a little bit of a different energy in terms of a modeling aspect that you can break yourself up from painting buckles and straps to, lots of really neat details that Bundo has. So haven't spent a lot of time on regiments. I'll let more informed people talk about that.
I think the challenge is most army lists have quote unquote gone up. If I look at how many models I had in an army list today versus in third edition, my armies feel smaller.
Yep.
So I don't feel like I have the points to go out and get a regiment of renown unless now there's some exceptions, like my son's army would still benefit from the goblin one where I get the Gobblepalooza and things like that. But outside of a specific use case where, for example, in Suns, I'm trying to get a wizard into my army and I don't have access to a wizard, or I'm looking for shooting potential from the Cruel Boy Regiment of Renown, there's not a lot of use cases where I was like, well, Neve brings a lot of movement to armies, but guess what? You don't need that. So what do you need? Actually, you know what? If I was going to bring one, it probably is Bundo because it's a big wound sink that can take a lot of damage, bring it to the fold, maybe a nice little piece to worry about with the Varan Guard. Like, cool, I'm going to counter charge and soak up that damage, and then everything else kind of counter shoots or does something. But
A big
yeah,
distraction card effects, right?
yeah. Like, there's nothing really stands out for me at the moment in order when it comes to regiments of renown, other than obviously Gotrek, as I also said, which
Right.
Gotrek is
Right.
Gotrek.
Right. So absolutely. There's going to be things that come out in the fold, but nothing that stands out to me at this moment.
No, I think stay in house for now.
Yep.
Unless there's a wizard that you really need, I'm staying in house with KO.
I agree.
Any closing thoughts, Matt? Anything that we haven't talked about, or anything you want to say at this particular point?
I love KO. I love the army. I love the models. I love the lore. I love the rules. I love the flavor. The art is fantastic in any of the books that you buy. Enjoy the experience of playing it. The skill expression that you can show off on the tabletop, the cleverness in list building. There's so many aspects to enjoy this army. I really love it. Consider shading your metallics that you'll be painting with blue instead of just Null Oil or Targor Raid Shade. I think it adds a little bit of diversity of color when you're painting steel. It gives it a colder, more sterile feel. Very interesting tip that I picked up from the wonderful people in your hobby Discord. And enjoy the army. Super cool. Lots of skill expression, lots of cleverness to exploit, and there's plenty of loopholes to be found.
I think also don't worry about the perfect list right now. Like, we are in an absolute crazy wild west where we don't know the meta we're entering. We don't know which battle planes are going to be most popular. You haven't had a really good opportunity to play around with your battle tactics yet. So have fun, build something that you're excited to play. And as the meta unfolds over the next couple of months, as points kind of settle and maybe some things go up or go down, or maybe we start to see the feel like, oh my gosh, we need to worry about zombies and Varangard and, ogre gluttons are, taking the world by storm right now.
Sure.
We had a really good idea of like what the tools we're going to need to be successful to handle the most popular builds. But right now, just have fun, do your thing.
metas and empires will rise and fall, but this army has the tools to deal with no matter what cream rises to the top.
Yes. Yeah, I was having a reflection moment. Like, yeah, probably. Unless Nighthawk really dominate, then I question if you can handle that one. If you start flooding Ghost Boys, that one could be a bit tough. Be tough. Unless you got all the deck sweepers in the world, then in that case, Thunder or Meta for the win.
There you go.
Any shout outs, any people you want to say hello to, or like, I know you were repping, unfortunately we tried to record and it was a bit noisy. You're actually recording at your games club, which was really cool, but they were noisy and I didn't want to tell them to shut up. So
neither did I.
You moved alternative locations, but you did have some cool background and some good people. Do you want to give them a shout out or anything you want to say before I go have lunch?
Yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you, your wonderful audience.
Thank you. Don't thank me. Thank you.
And thank you for repping Aethercast, a great group of guys with a great channel devoted to a single faction. Generating content is not easy in that limited, narrow scope, but they do it well. I shout out to Squad Marks, my local game club, for offering a great place to play. All the people in Southern California that have welcomed me when I moved from across the country from DC. I came here to SoCal and was just openly, warmly welcomed, although they will deny that with every last breath they have. If you're in the area in the mid-August timeframe, check out Old Town Throwdown. Wonderful, wonderful event held by
terrible TO though.
An okay guy. He's okay.
He knows a few things.
Yeah. So again, thanks so much, Coach. I really enjoyed this.
No, I really appreciate it. And again, folks, Matt doesn't know everything. We don't know everything. This hopefully will allow you to get started in your thinking. Some things what we've said you're going to disagree with. And I would encourage you to, one, leave me a comment. Let me know what you're thinking. But more importantly, Matt's been very, very kind to keep referring to my Discord. We have a very active KO community. Share your thoughts with those people because, I believe high tide lifts all boats and
sky vessels.
Figuratively but we're all learning this together, right? Like I've had some really good discussions. Like this is what I'm thinking, and like, have you thought about this or have you looked at this? And then some funny wizard's gone in and used the stats hammer to go, well, you compare this to this and this happens, and we all kind of learn this together. And
they're little collaboration laboratories, and I love it. And nobody from the overwhelming attitude is it's welcoming to all entry level or to all players, from entry level, new to AoS, new to this faction, new to the hobby, or the most top level veteran players that have been around for way too long. So it's always a great time to jump in there and get your hands dirty with some list building and synergy finding.
And if people want to talk to Matt as well, his Discord handle is right there. You'll see you pop up all the time. Are you on the socials at all? Are you on X or anywhere else we can find you?
Yeah, I'm on Discord. Salamander's been my internet handle since I was 12, so no point in changing it now. I'm on Twitter or X, and I'm on Instagram. I'm sure you can find me. I'm not terribly active, but if you message me, I'll respond, or DM me on Discord. I'm happy to entertain any cool thoughts and steal all your neat ideas that you bring me.
Isn't like half of Warhammer? Go find a list and an idea that someone's built upon, go do really well, and then claim it as your own. You're like, yeah, no, I thought about this list. Like, yeah, that's the internet, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, Matt, this has been an absolute ball. Thank you so much for an awesome discussion. Certainly one of my favorites for KO. Sorry, not sorry to my other guests. No, this has been really good. I really enjoyed it. I hope KO people, you have enjoyed it. You've learned a few things. You've taken some ideas, or at least challenged your own thinking and brought new ideas to the table. But Matt, you're a legend. Everyone, thank you for joining. And on that note, I'm going to go do some work. It's Friday. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks for hanging around until the end. I hope you enjoyed that video and you walked away with a few new ideas. Now, if you did, I would love it if you pressed like on the video, as well as left me a comment with your thoughts. The conversation will continue over on Discord, and the link is down below in the description. I also want to give a massive shout out to my AoS patrons and YouTube members who are supporting the channel.